What's an A player? It's someone who possesses the attitude of curiosity, connection, and total commitment to a vision. The work we do with our clients helps them both be A players and fill their organizations with A players. This is a segment of the Naked Leadership Podcast where you get to know the A players of our team here at Take New Ground. You'll get to see firsthand their brilliance, talent, and commitment as we talk in areas of their expertise. Hey all, this is Chad. Today I get to sit down with Mark Edwards, Associate Partner at Take New Ground. Mark has an insane history and rap sheet when it comes to finance and governance for organizations and technology, as we'll learn today. If you want to know anything from raising money to finding board members to strategic exits, Mark is your man. Let me ask you, are you prepared to embrace the AI revolution or risk being left behind in the rapidly evolving world of business? Join Mark and I in this wild AI adventure featuring the notorious chatGPT. We dive into the future of work with our new artificial partners, unveiling the rapid tech adoption cycle on steroids. Discover practical ways to prompt ChatGPT and integrate it into your life and business. Stay tuned for Mark's mind-blowing take that is both practical and beautiful at the same time. Prepare to question everything you know about AI. Buckle up. Let's dive in. Mr. Edwards, how are you?
Chad, it's always good to talk to you, brother. Doing well, thank you.
It's so great to be with you. I have been looking, we discussed this topic the last time we were together, and I've been excited about it ever since. I listen to whatever I can get my hands on, read whatever I get my hands on this topic. So I am really excited to put this in the frame of some of the work that we do, the work that you're doing with your clients. So we're talking about AI today. And, there is a vast conversation happening around AI. Everything from, the world's over, we might as well give up, to this is only going to improve every aspect of life. And then there's every viewpoint and estimation in between. And so I wanted to start this conversation first, but just getting personal with you, Mark, if you don't mind, how is it that you relate to what's going on with AI personally? How do you think about it, and what's your view? What's your view on it?
Well, I'm so glad we're talking about this topic. I mean, normally we talk about things that send people to sleep, like governance. So AI is like right there in the mainstream. But what's really interesting about this is I feel uniquely qualified to speak to this. For one reason, I'm British, and you may recall back in the early 1800s, it was actually between 1811 and 1816, that there were a group of textile workers called the Luddites, and they were very, very concerned that these new pieces of equipment were being brought into cotton mills and woolen mills, and so they used to sneak in at night and sabotage. And that word Luddite has become now a term for people who just are scared of technology. So this has been going on for hundreds of years. And I feel also really well qualified to speak about this because personally, I finished high school, and the best technology I had for doing math and physics at high school was something called a slide rule. Now, you may never have seen one of those, but our listeners, I mentioned slide rules to my kids, and they're like, "What? What's that?" And but the slide rule was a piece of technology being around for probably 100 years, and that's all I had through high school to do math and physics. And it wasn't until I got to college that I saw and encountered my first computer. I'm going somewhere with this. So that first computer was sitting in a room, and you could communicate. You had to punch cards, put them in a card reader, and then, use this language called Fortran or COBOL. And then a day or so later, you get a report back saying, misread on the card deck, or you made a mistake. And then you had to go back, figure out, and then submit your cards again. So I didn't really see a real computer until that IBM PC came out in the early 80s. And that was the beginning of that kind of interaction. The reason I bring this up is I spent my first part of my career in the computer industry just because I felt this was going to be kind of major. And the first kind of 2 decades was all about getting the hardware, software, and everything there. And then really the 80s and 90s were that. And then right around 2000 was when, the web sort of really took off. And why this is pertinent is what is happening, in my opinion, and what I share with particularly my 17-year-old, is this today, what is happening right now, is very analogous for me going from the slide rule to the computer. And when the computer came out, I mean, I worked for a company in the early 80s where that company didn't even want to make PCs. They didn't see any reason. And in fact, IBM didn't see any reason for PCs. They're like, there's a limited market for these computers. They're only ever going to, sit in back offices and crunch big data. And now
we have that quote. We have that quote on our website. In fact, it's at the bottom of our website. It's like something like, I believe there's a market for only 40 to 50 processing machines in the in the world, or something like that. So interesting. And so, what I share with myself, and so this is something I've watched, this development of the whole technology. Really was kind of 2 technologies: the semiconductor software technology, and then the internet, which is communications. Now, what that has set the scene for is AI, because actually that very company I worked for in the early 80s, back in 1985, I was selling AI, believe it or not. Well, AI came out in 1956, was when the term was first coined. And back in 1985, we were going after what you consider to be, deep AI, deep thinking, trying to go after human thought and really, true intelligence. And then there was a subcategory called machine learning, where, you had to kind of feed some data to algorithms and they would learn what to do. That was kind of like the poor man's AI back then, 40 years ago, because, we were really trying to go after human thought initially. Now, what's happened, and the big thing that's really happened, and why machine learning is now the key piece, is we have the internet. So we have this massive, what was challenging about machine learning was getting the data to feed to the algorithm so that they could, learn and produce something useful. And what's happened, and why this is such a big issue right now, is that these bots, whether ChatGPT or Bing or Bard from Google, they have feasted and gorged themselves on all the data available to mankind. Like everything that's been put on the internet, all written, all books have been digitized. All the information we're creating, massive amounts of data every second is being created. And all that has become this massive feast for these algorithms. And now they are smart in as much as they have digested all the information ever been created, and they digest it as we create new information, new data, they digest that. So that's why this is so interesting right now. And there's huge implications for everyone. Just like there was, 4 decades ago, when really personal computing just began, and the computer came out of that back room started to come into the front office, into the living room, into the home. This is what we're seeing now, but this is happening much, much faster. Right? We're moving at light speed compared to glacial speed when the computer industry started, because it was really slow. There was no communication. You heard of SneakerNet, where you had floppy disks used to exchange data. Now, we've got 5G ultra wide. So we're in a very different world, and it's very, very fast moving, and it has serious implications for everybody. Mm-hmm. How do you personally relate to those implications? I mean, there's so many that we could explore. I just want to put a pin in a couple of things that you're saying. As you started talking about, the Luddites, I thought also about the printing press, and a lot of the fear that was around the printing press. Mm-hmm. I mean, and we look at that now; it's like such a simplistic machine to distribute information. But at the time, it was groundbreaking. People couldn't really comprehend at the rate they could, disseminate information, get it out there, replicate it, all of that sort of stuff. So there is this way of being that we have through time, where each piece of technology that comes along, there's both fear and excitement for it.
You have to look at that. Why is that? Because knowledge is power. And before the printing press, there were very, very few people who could read, because reading was typically something that was tied to the church. So the clergy, monks, they were the people who read, they were the people who transcribed the books, predominantly the Bible at that point. When the printing press came out, that's what started to level the playing field. And that's what technology does. I mean, that's why we're in this world right now where you hear about, decentralized finance or DeFi, crypto, all these things. They're technologies. And what they do is they democratize, with a small d, they democratize society. And so the people who have power are threatened. And every form of technology, as it gets applied and disperses, threatens those people who typically are holding power. And AI is just that next, it's massive, and it's the next stage of effectively democratizing, because this is a way to harness all information, which is really a powerful kind of concept to think about it. And, up until now, you've had to typically employ really smart programmers if you want to, this is how many software companies have been built, to go mine information. And, well, you don't need that anymore necessarily. I mean, you will, it is easier, but even what's happening now is there are tips and techniques for just working with these chatbots. And so, in fact, today, we're on May 25th, 2023, and it was a fascinating article in today's New York Times, which I'll share a part of that. It was penned by Brian Chang. And he said, look, here's the ways that you can get more power and information out of these chatbots. And I think it's worth talking about them because it's really interesting. I've tried interfacing, and you get kind of it's actually very, very similar to the early days of computing. There's this term called garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yes,
garbage in, garbage out, and it's the same thing with chatbots. If you ask a kind of a bland question, you're going to kind of get a generic answer back.
Yes.
What Brian points out is there's some really interesting prompts. So he gives a couple of examples. He goes, there's a prompt that says, act as if. So what you're starting to do now is you're starting to interface to the chatbot more in a kind of like almost like in a human way, right? You're saying, so act as if you are my personal trainer, right? So you'd say act as if, and you could say, so act as if you're my personal trainer. What workout regime would you have me do, right? And then it'll come back. And then the second golden prompt is, tell me what else you need to answer that. And it may say, well, how old are you? Or what's your weight? Or what's your fitness level? Have you exercised up until now? So really, it's a conversation. And so that's one kind of key thing to think about. Are these really thoughtful interactions? So again,
yes.
I kind of, tie that to garbage in, garbage out, having a thoughtful interaction, thinking about, and what you're going to see now is people suggesting what prompts are, these gold prompts. So you start to look for that. I hadn't even Googled it yet, but actually we should ask the chatbot, what are the best golden prompts? So here we go. Now we're getting into a very circular kind of conversation, right?
Very much so. I really quick on this.
Yeah.
This is so interesting. So, ChatGPT gets my podcast descriptions and titles, my YouTube descriptions and titles, gets them to 90% right now. And that's been, just as you've been talking about, that for me, that's been a process of playing with different prompts. And you know how I started to think about this was, even as we go into work with teams or with founders, if we ask poor questions that are too general, too vanilla, not thoughtful, any of that sort of stuff, we're going to get the same quality of answers from them.
Exactly.
But if we go in and we're very clear on what it is that we want, we can be specific and we can be thoughtful, and we can, we're going to get gold in there. And that's been my experience. And my daughter's 17 years old, and she's thinking about what she wants to do, and things are happening so fast and things are changing so fast, right? She originally wanted to go into graphic design, and she's thinking, well, I mean, I don't know what future there is in graphic design, because you now have AI prompt graphic designers basically that can design you anything. And so I just said, look, if I were you right now, I would focus on learning to interact with these things, learning to prompt them, learning to ask questions, and how how you can get the best results from them. So it's so interesting that you went this. To me, this is like gold.
Well, and that's the first part. I think the second part, again, this comes from Brian Chen, is creating what he calls threads. And that's actually not very easy to do with Google Bard, because you really can't have more than one conversation going there. You can with Bing, although it does kind of clear out from time to time. But ChatGPT does allow you to have multiple threads. And think of a thread as an ongoing conversation. And you can have multiple. So again, what you're doing here is the prompts are opening up. The thread now is getting into that deeper kind of conversation on that topic. And in that case, the kind of advice there is think about and view the chatbot as almost like a human intern, where you are having a conversation, guiding, and then gently correcting, and really getting them to go look for more and more. So if you kind of take that approach, which is interesting, right? Now, it's treating the chatbot, the interface, more in a human fashion, and that's where the value will come. So I thought that was a very interesting approach. I think the other thing that's also mentioned in that article is using a framework of some sort. So if there's a particular type of framework out there, then use that. So this is where I think, when we look at coaching, for example, if we have a particular approach that we're looking at, and we've got that down into a framework, then training the chatbot on that, and then making that available to other people so they're able to stand on the shoulders of what we created. So I think that can be a very interesting opportunity for anyone in their business as they're looking to create value out there in the market. Is think about how you can seed something out and then basically train the algorithms to pick up on that and to enhance that. So I think there's some really, really interesting things that people are going to play with and experiment with to actually generate value.
So, Mark, for you personally, is this, are we doomed? Is this the end of the world? Or is it a new opening?
Well, as I said earlier, I am originally English, but I haven't lived there for a long time. And that's partly because I came to a land of opportunity, which is America, and I became American. And I'm a very optimistic person. And I have seen the benefits of technology, whether it's information technology or medical technology or environmental technology. I mean, I think technology is something that we in society have really been able to harness generally for good. Um, and I look at, the changes that have occurred as we have employed different types of technology throughout history. And I think generally we have made good of technology. And I do believe that this is yet another turn in technology. It opens up a lot of opportunities, and I think it's for us to step into that with a very positive mindset and look at how do we harness and make use of this. And as I look into the market, one of the people who's really going after this in very positive ways, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. He's really looking at, how do we do some really good things with AI? And I think that, we've done some really good things with information technology, computer hardware, software, and I'm a very optimistic person, and I believe generally that most people want to do good and leave the world a better place than they found it. And I think this is a generation, and this is a generational thing happening right now. This is a generational shift that is going to, it's going to alarm some people, because look, if you're an attorney, for example, I would say if you're, towards the end of your career, you're fine. If you're in law school right now, I would say I'd figure out how to use this or go look for another job, because that is definitely a career that there'll be some real winners and losers in law, because, quite frankly, the algorithm can just digest all legal cases and give you the best outcome. So there are going to be some career options that are going to, are going to disappear, and some will, some will grow. I mean, you only have to go back to when, when the phone system was first deployed, when Marvell deployed the phone system back in the 1940s. They projected that because they were, punch boxes where women, at that time they were women, used to plug in cables to connect phones. And they projected that within 40 years, 1 in 4 women in America would be telephone operators. And then they came out with basically the solid state circuit that was able to create those connections. And now there's no one working as telephone operator, but there's plenty of people working software engineers. So we're going to see a whole bunch of new careers come out of this. And I think your advice to your daughter is very sage, because those people who figure this out, they'll become the software engineers of AI, and the people who don't, they'll be the telephone operators. So, it's change. Look, it's all down to change and embracing change. And I think that's one of the things, T&G, we're really good at helping people prepare for change and transformation. And this is a big shift in terms of change and transformation. And that's exciting to some people and threatening to others.
So let's bring it to our listenership. Let's bring it to, our listenership reflects our clientele. So this is a great opportunity. We can speak right to those that we serve, which is this relevant for them? Should they be using it, or is it at this moment, is it a novelty?
Well, again, I come back to computers in the 1980s, and there were a lot of businesses who felt that they would never need a computer, that was, they'd stay on, pen and paper, calculator and people and all that stuff. Show me a business today that's not using a computer, right? So it's the same thing. So you're either going to be an early adopter, a mid or a late adopter of this technology. So that's going to depend on what you do and how you embrace it. The early adopters may or may not be successful. The late adopters may get run over by it. So I think that every business should be assessing how this technology will impact them, their segment of industry. It will affect everyone in time. Now, we're moving at a much more rapid pace than computer adoption, right? That took a lot longer. Internet was faster than the PC kind of revolution, and this is going to be faster.
Yeah.
So I would say for everyone, it's going to affect you. The question is, are you going to get ahead of it, or are you going to be reacting to it?
Life is not fair. It's what you negotiate. Let me say that one more time. Life is not fair. It's what you negotiate. Now, that's an interesting thought. If that's true, it means that everything you have in life right now, the possessions, the relationships, the fitness, the mindset, are all a product of your negotiations with others and yourself. And if that's true, wouldn't you want to be very clear on how you negotiate? What's effective and what's ineffective, what your strengths are and what your blind spots are? It is, after all, producing all the results in your life. So here's the deal. We put together a 15-question quiz that you can take in 5 minutes or less and find out exactly what your negotiation style is. The results of this quiz will give you insight into your strengths and blind spots in negotiation. It will also give you insight in how you can accentuate those strengths or compensate for the blind spots. Think for just 1 second with me all of the conversations you're having in your life. Think about compensation or advancement conversations with people on your team, discussing financial decisions with a partner, or just getting your kids to get their damn shoes on so that you can leave the house. All of these conversations are negotiations. This simple yet powerful tool has the potential to reinvent the way you get what you want in every aspect of life. Go to negotiation.takenewground.com right now, or click the link in the description of this episode and find out what negotiation style you embody. You can thank us later. Now back to the show. How would you start that assessment, Mark? I mean, our team has already started that assessment. What does this mean for coaching and consulting? How, what happens when a lot of the questions we get on coaching calls are easily answered, even in our voice or from our content, by the quick question to an AI bot or a chat bot? That's an interesting question that we're already considering. For those who are listening to this, how do they start that assessment of, wow, what is this going to mean?
Well, so before I answer that, let me just pick up on what you said about coaching. Yes, content is certainly one part of coaching, which is asking a question, getting an answer. Another part is accountability. I could see how machine learning can address content. Not quite sure how it can address accountability just yet, right? So there's sort of like the hard, we'll call the hard soft things, right? Hard being, something that's data, and soft being something that's not data. So I think right now, this comes back to a strategic, this is basically a strategic review of your business. So we've talked before about being in the business and working in the business and working on the business. So this is back to working on the business. And this is, look, your day-to-day operation, what you do to run your business, heads down. You won't see AI coming. It may or may not impact you, in the very near term or the medium term, but long term it will. So if you're just in the business, then it'll maybe something you hear about in the news. If you're on your business and you take that time from time to time to work on your business, this is one of the pieces to look at. So when you work on the business, you're looking at what's happening in my industry, what's happening with my competitors. And we really haven't looked at technology for decades because, everyone uses computers now. But I mean, this was back in the 80s. This was a topic. And even in the 90s was a topic about how we used computers. I mean, I was an officer at a public company in the 90s. And we had to have, something like a disaster recovery plan as a public company. Yet we didn't until we did. We were thinking about technology in ways in the 80s and 90s that we haven't had to since the internet came out, because, like all data exists in the cloud. You don't have to worry about, disaster recovery plans anymore. It's just like, it's all handled. So I would say, again, we're seeing now a return of, we need to evaluate the impact of technology in each of our businesses in a way that we haven't had to in the last 20 years, just because technology has become ubiquitous, it's become easy, you haven't had to think about it. Well, AI is changing the game, and now this is a piece of technology that every business, from a strategic review, needs to start looking at. So when in that, every 3 months or 6 months, or worst case, a year, that you really, running your business, you really take that time out, a day or two. We'd recommend at least, a couple of days every 12 months or one day every 6 months, where, bring someone in to guide you through that strategic review and strategic analysis. That's something TNG does a great job of. We come in, spend that day or 2 days in that strategic review. One of the things to be considered now is the impact of AI, and look at it both from what's happening in my particular industry, what's happening, what are the opportunities this creates? It's going to create opportunities, different engagement with customers, different engagement with suppliers, with other stakeholders, and what threats does it bring? So really doing like a SWOT analysis around the implementation of this technology, and is it something I can get ahead of, or am I going to be caught up at it somehow? And those companies that get ahead could do very, very well, because this is going to be a big shift, and there will be winners and losers.
Yeah, that's so interesting to think about. This is going to be such a cornerstone to your planning when you're working on your business. Something to consider, and also, definitely look outside of yourself. Look to an expert who can walk you through what are the potential implications of AI on how you operate now. So, as founders or CEOs or leaders in a business, beyond just consulting, one of the things that I talk about often with some of my clients, and even just in casual conversation, I love this topic, so it comes up a lot with people that I'm talking about. And I think it's even just practically, it's a good idea just to spend some time just on some of these bots, just on these chat GPTs, practicing prompting it, and try different things and see what kinds of conversations you can have with it. I personally, that's where it started for me. And then I personally have freed up, I would say 2 to 3 additional hours a week on this thing. And I don't even pay for the premium version of it. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I'll come back to the adoption computer now, that particular analogy. And I'm very fortunate. I have two generations of kids, right? I have kids who were, they were young in the early 80s, and I have a son who was born in the early 2000s. And what I noticed with my kids from the early 80s, when we got an IBM PC AT in the early 80s when we first came out, as soon as my kids could, 3 years old, they got on this computer and they started tapping around. And we didn't have many applications. We had, Lotus 123, which is now Excel, and we had Harvard Graphics, which is now PowerPoint. And there wasn't much else you could do. You could program in BASIC and things like that. But what I noticed, and this is a generational thing, I approached computers at that time as if they might break. And my kids at 2 and 3 just approached them like they wouldn't, they'd just try anything. And they would do things that I'm like, wow, how'd you do that? And then I noticed in the early 2000s, my son, now we move into, the iPhone and that type of thing. And again, I look at an iPhone, when I first got the iPhone, it's like, well, let me, I need to figure out this. He'd just pick it up and he'd do stuff. And I realize now that playing, experimenting, engaging in a, we use this term like, with a child's mind. And just try stuff, play. This is a playground right now. And technology, it's robust. You're not going to go and blow up a town or something if you put the wrong thing in there. Nothing bad is going to happen. So what's the worst going to happen? It'll give you an answer back and say, I don't understand you, or it's a conversation. So I would encourage play, engage, try, experiment, and then ultimately, once you've have a little familiarity, then it's a matter of strategize, for your business. I mean, it's one thing it's great to personally, use these things, but we're here talking about business right now, and what is the impact? And so I would heartily suggest play, experiment, and especially if you have kids or younger people, great, involve them in the conversation, and then that preps you for when you really want to look at the strategic implications of your business. That is a much more serious conversation at that point.
Yeah, if you're listening to this thinking, well, I don't even know where I would start, I have an invitation for you, an experiment. But go take a look at what you have in your freezer and your fridge, the staples, right? Thinking about like chicken breasts, whatever the staples are that you have readily available. And then think about what mood you're in for dinner. Because this is a very common complaint I hear I don't know what to make for dinner, right? So go take an inventory of your ingredients and think about your preferences for the evening and go plug it into ChatGPT. Tell them what ingredients you have, what preferences you have, and what you should make for dinner and the best recipe or most popular recipe available. Immediately, you have this dinner that you can make with your ingredients, most likely, tailored to your tastes, and it happens in moments. And it's a really fun, I start thinking about playing like that with it, and then you will start to notice when it gives you not great results compared to, I make this small tweak and then I get a result that really helps me, really save some time, energy, and focus for me. So you can do little exercises like that.
Yeah, and I would even challenge you to get a little bit more creative. And this, back to your comment about, to your daughter, the future will belong to people who express their creativity. So use it, some of us like me, I've been very operational most of my life. I'm seeing now the benefits of starting to express creativity in a more overt fashion. So I would to your example say to ChatGPT, act as if you are the chef in a Michelin star 3-star restaurant in Marrakesh, and I am, Richard Branson, and I've just walked in. What would you make for me, given these ingredients? Have some fun. Start to engage. Start to get outrageous with stuff, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Well, this is I hope this isn't the last time we talk about this, Mark, because this just really gets me going. I told you when we were talking about this, I wanted this conversation for myself. So thank you for bringing it. I love watching and hearing your brain work around this stuff. It's really helpful for me. So thank you for this.
Well, thank you. I view this, just to kind of cap this off, I view this as a clarion call to creativity. And I think that all technology throughout human history, all technology gives us the opportunity to become more creative and less tied to a particular repetitive task. And that's really what technology does. It looks at what is repetitive and does it. So we can be freed of repetitive tasks to do more creative things. And I think AI is exactly in line with all other technologies. And so this is going to be a great opportunity to become creative. If you don't view yourself as a creative person, you are. So start getting that mindset about how can I become creative. And if you don't have a coach, that's one thing to get a coach for. Then is, hey, I'm getting a coach because I want to become more creative, and because that is where the future will belong to the creatives in our community. So, this is a wake up call to get more creative.
That's a meaningful way to cap all this off, because I think that's an uncommon view of this stuff. Like, I think many people, I know I can fall into this for sure. So I'll just speak for myself. I won't say how many people think this. I know for myself, I can start to view this as a very cold, logistical, or, something that can carry out tasks for me. But I do notice that when I use it and I'm paying attention and I'm playful with it, my creativity goes off the charts, particularly in the stuff that I love, YouTube and podcasting and coaching. It really opens up possibilities that I didn't have before, or that I didn't see before. So thank you for that. I think that's a beautiful place to leave this.
Great.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Chad, thank you, as always.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Well, my friends, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Naked Leadership Podcast. As a heads up, every Friday we post a Cliff Notes version of that week's conversation with all the highlights in under 5 minutes. Check that out for a quick and powerful reminder of the principles discussed. I hope this conversation has been valuable to you. If it has, the greatest compliment you could pay us is sharing it with somebody who could use it. Thanks so much for listening, and until next week, bye-bye, everybody.